Imagine this. You've spent your whole life giving, sacrificing, always putting your children first. And now, when you should finally be enjoying peace and respect, you're met with silence, with averted glances, with calls that never come. You're not a priority, you're an option when it's convenient for them. But listen to me. The problem isn't that they ignore you. The problem is that you allow it. You keep waiting for gratitude from those who only see you as an obligation fulfilled. You settle for the scraps of their time, for cheap excuses, for disregard disguised as distraction. That ends today. Today, you're going to understand what to do when your children don't appreciate you, when the respect you deserve is nowhere to be found. And what you'll discover by the end of this video will change the way you face this, forever. I'm Celia, and I'm here to tell you what no one else dares to say. How much longer will you keep waiting to be appreciated? How many more times will you settle for a quick call, a cold message, a rush visit where they barely look you in the eye? You keep telling yourself they're just busy, that they have their own lives, that things aren't like they used to be. But the truth is far more painful. They don't see you as a priority because you've put yourself in second place. You've spent decades unknowingly begging for love, disguising it as patience, as understanding, as one day they'll get it. But respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you demand. Imagine a towering tree, its roots deep and strong, offering shade and fruit to everyone around it for years. Its branches provided shelter, its trunk was a source of support, its presence a gift to those who surrounded it. But one day, its leaves began to fall, the fruit stopped growing, and little by little, people stopped noticing it. They walked past it without a second glance. No one stopped to appreciate what it had once given them, and when it was no longer useful, they didn't even notice its absence. That tree is you. You gave everything in the name of love, believing that one day they would recognize it. But gratitude that was never taught doesn't just appear out of nowhere. And the worst part, by the time you realize this, you've already given too much. Maybe you grew up in a generation that taught you a child's love is sacred, that it's unconditional, that simply being a parent guarantees respect. But in today's world, respect doesn't come with age. It's built through the boundaries you set. And if you allowed them to walk over you once, they'll do it twice, 3 times, until they learn they can ignore you without consequence. This isn't about becoming a tyrant or demanding reverence. It's about realizing that you've become invisible because you let it happen. You were their refuge, their support, their constant. And now that they need you less, they think they can reduce you to an old piece of furniture sitting in the corner of the room. And you, with that blind loyalty, keep waiting for a sign that they still see you. Enough. Love isn't something you beg for, and respect isn't freely given. If your children have decided you no longer matter in their lives, then let them feel the difference. Learn to disappear, not physically, but emotionally. Stop calling those who don't answer. Stop forcing conversations that only you initiate. Stop extending your hand to those who only remember you when they need something. Look around you. How many times have you felt alone, even in the presence of your own family? How many times have your words fallen into an empty space where no one listens? It's time to stop playing the victim. Respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you demand. And if they haven't understood that, then it's time you learn to live without seeking their validation. Because here's the hardest truth of all. If you keep accepting crumbs, you'll never get the feast you deserve. If you keep expecting respect from those who have already shown you they don't care, you'll stay trapped in a vicious cycle of disappointment and frustration. In the first point, we talked about stopping the habit of begging for love, about understanding that respect isn't something you plead for, it's something you enforce through actions. But there's something even more destructive that keeps you tied to your children's indifference. Guilt. That lingering feeling that you owe them something, that no matter what they do, you are still burdened with the duty to be there, to fix things, to sacrifice yourself. And that is a deadly trap. We've now reached the second key point of this video, and it's this. Let go of guilt, because you owe them nothing. For years, you were a provider, a pillar, a guide. You lost sleep, gave up dreams, put their well-being above your own. You did it out of love, without expecting rewards, because that's what being a parent meant. But listen carefully. Fulfilling your duty as a mother or father is one thing. Dragging that responsibility with you for the rest of your life is another. Because it's not a debt. It's a natural cycle. They grew up, they chose their path, and now it's their turn to take responsibility for their lives, just like you once did. But this is where emotional manipulation comes in. Society has drilled into your mind that being a good parent means always being available, no matter what, without conditions, without boundaries. And the moment you dare to think of yourself, you're labeled as selfish, ungrateful, or even cruel. That's not love, that's submission. The Stoics said that the greatest strength of a person is the ability to accept reality as it is and act accordingly. And the reality is this: your children no longer need you the way they once did. But if you haven't learned to let go, if you're still trying to prove that you're useful, they will take advantage of that, whether consciously or not. Guilt is a powerful weapon. It makes you say yes when you should say no. It makes you open your wallet when you should close it. It makes you accept disrespect just because they're your children. And the worst part, the more you give in, the less they value you. Because what comes too easily is taken for granted. If every time they ignore you, you're still there, what incentive do they have to change? None. You've been conditioned to believe that your love is measured by what you give, rather than by who you are. And that is the biggest lie of all. Think about this. When was the last time you did something just for yourself, without worrying about whether they'd approve? When was the last time you put your own needs first, without feeling guilty? If your answer is a long time ago or never, then you weren't taught to be free, you were taught to be a martyr. But here's the truth. The best way to teach others to respect you is by respecting yourself first. If you feel obligated to keep giving when you've already given everything, ask yourself, who is imposing this obligation on you? And more importantly, why are you still accepting it? Stop carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you. What you did for your children was an act of love, not a lifelong debt. And if today they make you feel like you owe them, that you have to keep sacrificing yourself to be worthy of their affection, then what you're dealing with is not love. It's manipulation. Break the chain before it consumes you. Because here's the most important point of all. If you don't give yourself permission to live without guilt, no one else will. If you've made it this far, you've already understood two fundamental truths. Respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you enforce. And guilt is the poison that keeps you chained to those who don't value you. But there's a third factor that, if left unchecked, will keep dragging you into a cycle of disrespect and indifference. We've now reached the third key point of this video, and this is where things truly start to change. Cut the flow, because without respect, there are no favors, no money, nothing. How many times have they reached out only when they needed something? Weeks, months, maybe even years go by without a genuine call, and then suddenly you get a message. They ask how you've been, tell you they miss you, make you feel important, until the real reason for their contact appears. They need money, a favor, a way out of a problem, and you, holding on to the hope that this time will be different, fall into the trap. Because deep down, a part of you wants to believe they still appreciate you. But the truth is different. They reach out when they need you, not because they miss you. And if you keep allowing it, you'll never be anything more than a resource instead of a person. The issue isn't that they ask, it's that they do it without reciprocity or gratitude. And the worst part, the more you give, the less they respect you. It's the law of disguised abuse. As long as you keep saying yes, they'll keep taking. Why? Because in their minds, you exist to fix their problems. Because you always have. Because you never taught them that there were limits. But now, it's time to change the rules. No respect, no favors, no presence, no support, no gratitude, no help. Imagine you have a water faucet in the middle of a desert. For years, people have come to drink from it without ever asking how you're doing or if you need anything. They only show up when they're thirsty. And you keep giving them water without question. Until one day, you turn it off. What do you think will happen? First, they'll react with shock, complaints, maybe even anger. They'll wonder why you've changed, why you're suddenly setting conditions. But if you stand firm, they'll learn. They'll learn they can't just appear when it's convenient for them. They'll learn that respect is non-negotiable. And most importantly, you will learn something too, that saying no is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect you can make. If taking this step feels difficult, ask yourself this: what would happen if you were gone tomorrow? If one day you simply disappeared and they realized they could no longer rely on you? Because let me tell you something, most of the people who use you today will find someone else tomorrow. You are not indispensable in their lives, but you are in your own. And the sooner you understand this, the sooner you'll reclaim the dignity you've lost along the way. Before we move on to the next point, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if anything I've said so far has made you reflect, type, "My peace is worth more." That way, I'll know you're ready to take back control of your life. There are still important lessons ahead, and the final one is the one that can truly change everything. If you've understood that respect is something you enforce, not beg for, that guilt can no longer keep you chained, and that without respect there are no favors, no money, nothing, then you've already taken important steps. But there's something deeper, something far more dangerous, that can sabotage all your progress if you don't face it in time. We've now reached the fourth point of this video, and this is where reality hits the hardest. Make yourself visible, because being ignored comes with consequences. The biggest mistake people make when trying to reclaim their dignity is resigning themselves to being a shadow. They believe that if their children ignore them, the best thing to do is simply accept it. They convince themselves that that's just life, that times have changed, that there's nothing they can do about it. And little by little, without even realizing it, they become invisible. But invisibility isn't a solution. It's a slow emotional death. Because when you accept being invisible, you don't just disappear from others' lives, you start to disappear from your own. Being ignored isn't just a sign of indifference, it's a form of disrespect. It's a silent message that says, "You're not important, you're not worth my time, you can wait." And the problem is, when you accept it without a fight, you reinforce that idea. Your children learn that they can go on with their lives without looking at you, without listening to you, without including you. And instead of doing something about it, you convince yourself that it's normal, that it's just the way things are. But let me tell you something. You are not put on this earth to become a ghost. If they've decided to ignore you, let them feel the difference. Because up until now, they've played with the certainty that you'll always be there, waiting, available, accepting whatever little they choose to give you. But what would happen if one day you truly disappeared? If you stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped being available only when it's convenient for them? If you stop being that unconditional safety net that always gives without receiving? Because here's the key. When someone takes you for granted, the only way to make them value you is by showing them what life is like without you. The problem is, many people are afraid to do this. They fear that if they pull away, they'll lose the little they still have. They think that if they stop insisting, their children will forget about them completely. But if that's the case, what does that say about your relationship? A bond built on obligation, habit, or convenience isn't a real bond. It's a chain keeping you tied to a place where you are not respected. And if staying present only means being ignored, then the question is simple. What do you gain by staying? Look around. How many aging parents live their final years waiting for a call, waiting for an invitation, waiting for someone to make them feel like they still matter? How many of them die while still alive, sitting in a silent house, staring at a phone that never rings, carrying memories that weigh more than their reality. Don't be one of them. Your worth doesn't depend on the attention you receive. It depends on how much you demand respect. And if the world has decided to ignore you, then it's time for them to understand what your absence truly means. Because here's the harshest truth of all. If you don't make yourself visible, you will disappear completely. Not because life is unfair, but because you allowed it to happen. If you've made it this far, you already know that indifference is never accidental. Guilt keeps you chained, and allowing yourself to be ignored without consequences only reinforces their disregard for you. But there's an even bigger mistake people make when trying to reclaim their dignity and self-respect, clinging to a family that no longer exists. We've now reached the 5th point of this video, and it's time to talk about an uncomfortable truth. Build your own circle, because family is chosen, not imposed. All your life you've been told that family is everything, that blood ties outweigh any other relationship, that you must always be there no matter what. But what happens when that same family turns its back on you? What happens when all you receive is disrespect, indifference, and manipulation? What no one tells you is that family isn't an automatic right. It's a relationship that must be earned through mutual respect and affection. And if your children have done nothing to earn your presence, why do you keep acting like you owe them something? The worst mistake you can make is waiting for things to go back to how they used to be. Waiting for the day they finally realize your worth, for some miracle where they start treating you with respect, for the love you gave to magically return to you. It won't happen, and every day you spend waiting is another day wasted from your own life. Because a family that doesn't value you isn't family. It's just a tie that only exists in your mind. If your children ignore you, only reach out when they need something, don't include you in their lives, or don't treat you with respect, then it's time to look elsewhere. Build your own circle. Stop holding on to people who don't want you in their lives. The family that matters is the one that respects you, listens to you, and makes you feel seen. And more often than not, that's not the family you were born into. It's the friends who truly care. It's the people who value you without needing a biological connection. It's those who choose to have you in their life, not those who see you as an obligation. But before you can do this, one thing must change first: your mindset. You need to stop expecting respect from where it has never existed. You need to accept that forced affection is meaningless, and love out of obligation is a lie. And most importantly, you need to understand that you don't need validation from people who have done nothing to deserve your presence. Stop giving your loyalty to those who see you as nothing more than a burden. Breaking this pattern isn't easy. Guilt and habit are invisible chains. But here's the truth. It's never too late to surround yourself with people who truly value you. It's never too late to make new friends, to find real companionship, to stop waiting for something that will never come. And when you finally let go, when you stop clinging to a family that no longer exists, you'll realize something powerful. You were never alone. You were just looking in the wrong direction. If you keep waiting for things to change on their own, you'll stay trapped in a life that no longer belongs to you. We've already said it. Family isn't imposed, it's chosen. But there's something even more dangerous than waiting for love from those who don't value you, and that's continuing to sacrifice yourself for them without receiving anything in return. We've now reached the 6th point of this video, and this is where things get personal. Your life comes first. Break the addiction to pleasing others. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. It's an ordinary afternoon. You're sitting in the same chair as always, waiting for that visit they promised but never showed up for. You glance at the clock again, check your phone for the 100th time, no calls, no messages. And then, like so many times before, you tell yourself it doesn't matter, that they're probably just busy, that you shouldn't be upset about it. But deep down, you feel it. That ache in your chest, that emptiness that has become familiar. And tomorrow, you'll do the same. And the day after that too, because you keep putting others first, even when they've made it clear you're not on their list of priorities. The problem isn't that they're selfish. The problem is that you're still available to people who have already shown you they don't deserve it. You've built your identity around what you can do for others. For decades, you were the unconditional support, the one who was always there, the one who put your own happiness second to make sure everyone else was okay. And now, when you finally have the chance to live for yourself, you don't know how. Because you've been programmed to please, to wait for others' approval before doing what you truly want. But listen to me, no one is going to give you permission to be happy. No one is going to say, okay, you've done enough, now it's your turn to live. It's never going to happen. If you keep waiting for that validation, you'll leave this world without ever having truly lived. It's harsh, but it's the truth. The addiction to pleasing others is an invisible prison. It makes you believe that if you say no, if you start putting yourself first, people will reject you. But the truth is, for the first time in your life, you'll start taking back control. Look around you. How many people your age are trapped by guilt, by the fear of being judged, by the ridiculous idea that choosing yourself is selfish? How many keep saying yes when what they really want to scream is enough? How many leave this world full of regret, knowing they never had the courage to choose their own happiness? Don't be one of them. The life you have left isn't meant for continuing to serve everyone else. It's meant for you to finally learn to serve yourself. If something inside you is resisting this, if there's a voice whispering, "But they're my family, I can't do this," then ask yourself, have they thought about you? Have they put their lives on hold to please you? If the answer is no, then stop doing what they would never do for you. Because until you break this addiction, you will remain an emotional slave to those who wouldn't lift a finger for you. Put your life first, not tomorrow, not when it's easier, now. If you've made it this far, if you now understand that respect isn't something you beg for, that guilt is a trap, that money and favors without reciprocity reduce you to a mere resource, that you must make yourself visible, choose who gets your time, and break the addiction to pleasing others, then you're finally seeing the truth with new eyes. But there's still one final blow, the last piece of the puzzle. Because everything you've learned up to this point will mean nothing if you continue to be present in the lives of those who have turned you into a shadow. We've now reached the seventh and final point of this video, and it's the most powerful of all. Disappear for a while. Let them feel the impact of your absence. Up until now, you've been stuck in the same position, always there, always accessible, always waiting for a change that never comes. You're like air, essential yet invisible. And that's the problem. Because when something is always there, it's taken for granted. It isn't appreciated, it isn't valued, and it certainly isn't respected. But when it disappears, the void is impossible to ignore. Imagine just for a moment that without any warning, you stop calling, stop texting, stop asking how they're doing. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but simply because you step back. You live your life without expecting anything from them. No complaints, no arguments, no demands. You just stop being available. What do you think will happen? At first, maybe nothing. They'll continue with their routine, secure in the belief that, as always, you'll be there the moment they decide to remember you. But over time, your absence will start to weigh on them. At some point, they'll feel it. They'll find silence where your voice used to be, an emptiness where your presence once stood, the discomfort of realizing that if they look for you, you might not be there anymore. And that's when they'll finally understand what you really meant in their lives, because the harshest lesson isn't losing someone when it's too late. It's realizing you never appreciated them when you still had the chance. But the most important part of all of this isn't what they feel, it's what you will feel. Because for the first time in a long time, you will be free. Free from waiting, free from disappointment, free from the burden of maintaining relationships that only drain you. And in that moment, you'll discover something you never thought possible, that you can live without them, that you can be happy without their validation, that you can breathe without the anxiety of hoping for a gesture that never comes. Disappearing isn't a punishment, it's a strategy. It's the only way to see who truly cares about you and who only kept you around out of habit. And when you finally do it, when you dare to take that step, I promise you'll learn a truth that will change your life forever. The ones who truly value you will come looking for you, and the ones who don't, they were never meant to stay. If you've made it this far, it's because you're ready to face reality head on. Not everyone has the courage to hear uncomfortable truths without looking away. But understanding what I've told you today isn't enough. What truly matters is what you do with this truth. You can keep waiting for things to change on their own. You can keep making excuses for those who ignore you. You can keep putting others before yourself. Or you can start living with the dignity you deserve. The choice is yours. Respect isn't something you beg for. Guilt isn't something you carry. Companionship isn't something you plead for. And peace isn't something you negotiate. If they want you in their life, let them prove it. And if they don't, move on. Because life doesn't wait for those who stay trapped in the nostalgia of what could have been. I want to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment with just one phrase. Respect isn't begged for. That way, I'll know you got the message. This channel doesn't exist to sugarcoat the truth or give you false hope. Hogar de Sabiduría is for those who have decided to wake up, take control, and live their later years with strength, not submission. If you're one of those people, subscribe now and become part of this community that has chosen to stop being invisible. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these words, because sometimes an uncomfortable truth is the only thing that can pull us out of a place we were never meant to stay. The conversation doesn't end here. On the screen, you'll see 2 videos that dive even deeper into this journey of transformation. Choose one and keep moving forward.